through all of that, one thing that never changed, that I was always creating content, whether that was blog posts, video lessons, podcasts. I was always like doing things around the community. I ended up having a lot of passion for that. And that's what led me to Auth0 to be able to do that as a developer advocate for that company. Our big plan is to make sure any common use case when it comes to authentication can be handled with a plug-and-play solution.
Hey, this is Brian, and you're listening to JAMstack Radio, a bi-weekly series where we discuss the JAMstack, a new way of building websites and apps that are fast, secure, and simple to work with. JAMstack Radio is brought to you by Heavybit, a program dedicated to helping startups take their developer products to market. For more information, visit heavybit.com. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us on Twitter at JAMstack Radio. Welcome to another installment of JAMstack Radio. On the line, we got Will Johnson from Auth0. What is up, Will?
Yo, what's up, B. Dougie? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure. Yeah, we've chatted before, not on this podcast, but other, I guess, things that I do out in the world. But I'm happy to have you on. I'm happy that you're at Auth0 too as well. Like we had James Q. Quick on earlier this year talking about some other updates, but also talking about developer content, which was that episode. So honestly, it wasn't too Auth0 heavy of an episode, but I'm happy to talk about some stuff that you're working on. But before, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you do and how you got there?
So for me, currently, I'm a developer advocate at Auth0. Before that, I was working at Egghead.io, which is a learning platform for developers. And before that, I usually did like factory work and things of that nature. I ended up switching careers just because I wanted to provide for my family, feeling like I wasn't really reaching out potential. So taught myself how to code using like online resources, went on Twitter, networked like crazy because I knew wasn't anyone really going to beat down my door to hire me with having a background of factories and call centers and jobs like that. So through that, ended up getting the job at Egghead, got noticed by the founder, and then did a lot of community work for them. But through all of that, one thing that never changed, that I was always creating content, whether that was blog posts, video lessons, going on Twitter spaces and podcasts. I was always like doing things around the community. I ended up having a lot of passion for that. And that's what led me to Auth0 to be able to do that as a developer advocate for that company.
Yeah, awesome. And I'm a big fan of Auth0. I've done Auth0 since I moved to San Francisco. I had met some early employees there, and it basically solved a problem that I was looking for, especially when I was working at Netlify, looking for some easy authentication solutions. I know you have a bit of background in Ruby on Rails. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. When I was at Egghead, I was learning Ruby on Rails for, I think, worked for about a year and a half, I think.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And what I liked about Rails, when I was doing it back for my first job, is that authentication was built in through some Ruby gems. And that was not the case when I switched over to JavaScript early like mid 2010s. And Auth0 is basically that sort of plug and play solution that I needed to do authentication. So, but I know because Auth0 has been they've been growing like crazy. Y'all are doing way more stuff than just adding some drop-in replacements for managing user database and login credentials. So you actually came on to talk about Auth0 Action. So do you want to give us a quick, what is that? What is that trying to accomplish?
Sure. So basically, Auth0 Actions allows you to customize your login experience outside of what's available to be done with Auth0. Like some of the use cases that people may have is for like ID verification. If you need to have someone log in and send a picture of their ID, that's something that's not natively available within Auth0. Or even I've seen some use cases where people were able to have someone log in and then like another step of verification is to use their voice to recognize it, to verify who that person is. So with Actions, it allows you to kind of customize your experience and provide different ways to have security with your users. One of the biggest pieces of that is that a lot of it can be like low to no code. We have the Auth0 marketplace, and you can take a lot of pre-made solutions for common use cases and plug it right into the Auth0 dashboard. And you won't have to write any code, and you will have a tons of flexibility and customization right inside your app without you having to, do any code yourself.
Wow, that's amazing too as well. And Okay, so I didn't even know about the marketplace too as well. I feel like every time I talk to someone from Auth0, they're just pitching me new things that I just haven't noticed because I've been just using the basics of the basics from it. So the marketplace, it looks like a bunch of third-party integrations as well, maybe some community stuff that you could add into your Auth0 authentication.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's both. There's some that's, made by community members, like, regular developers like you and me that may, hey, I've solved this use case. Let me put this out and let other people, share that benefit. And we also have official partner with different companies, like Twilio and things like that. I think I think we have a GitHub one in there too.
Okay, nice.
If you search for it.
Yeah, I see the Netlify one, which is like usually my go-to is adding authentication to one of my Netlify sites just for, we do like a lot of like one-off problem solving, in DevRel. I mean, you already figured this out, but you got to spin up a little side project to support a thing that you're doing, like whether it's long lasting or long lived.
Mm-hmm.
What's nice about this is that if you set up authentication on one of those little side projects, maybe for an event or maybe interactions with your Discord, you'll have a user database, a user table. And also what's nice about this, and like, I already know this, but like Auth0 can help you to be GDPR compliant as well. And also the California Data Protection Act as well. All stuff I just don't want to have to care about. I just want someone to tell me, what checkboxes to do to make sure that this is legit, which is pretty awesome. So yeah, Auth0 has come a long way.
Yeah.
So we talked about the marketplace, but I want to go back to the Auth0 actions.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned about functionality like ID verification, which I feel like, crypto's a thing. Like every time I sign up to another one of these like blockchain solution apps, I got to like submit my knowledge. I don't know, basically my true identity to the platform to make sure I can pay taxes if I happen to make money on something.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm getting at is like that's a familiar experience. Whenever I sign up to like a new platform, I got to submit my ID, which is nice to know that there's a pathway, there's like a paid way for me to solve that with Auth0. But I'm curious, do you have any other examples of what sort of actions you've seen people create?
Those are like the main things. We had a Auth0 actions hackathon not too long ago, and those kind of the cool ones we've seen from that.
Okay. I'm curious, Auth0, you just tweeted, I know I'm going to pivot a little bit, but I just saw you tweet a video of the Auth0 ambassadors.
Yeah.
Which I'm curious to know more about what that program is.
Sure. So the Auth0 ambassadors, a kind of simple way to succinctly say what it is, it's kind of almost like a DevRel in training program.
Okay.
So basically, it's people who write about identity content. Doesn't necessarily have to be even Auth0 related, but if you're talking about, SAML or doing single sign-on or working with OpenID Connect or something like that, you can get paid by Auth0 to create that content, and you also get like coaching and training. You'll be able to get paid to like speak at events and things like that. So it's sort of like our way of giving back to the community for the people who are speaking and educating about identity, because it is a complex topic. And like you said earlier, it's not really something that you kind of want to think about. So to give back to the people who are helping people along that journey, that's what the ambassadors program is for.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and it's funny because I months ago I actually tweeted about, because I've been mentoring a lot of folks getting into industry, folks who like either doing a boot camp program or coming out of college, and being a persona on the internet, like sometimes people reach out to me, so I'm happy to be helpful. But one things that I like seeing, like if I go to like promote somebody or go pitch them to get a job here or there, is actually having content. Because I figured even if you're not doing DevRel, but you're doing engineering, like being able to showcase that you can talk about technical problems and convince people that decisions you made in the code is like the decisions you made, like whether they're right or wrong, like just state your case. And that's exactly what you do in all the times in pull request. You open up a PR, you're like, hey, I did this. This is what I tried. So having the Auth0 ambassador, I'm actually going to be pitching folks to go take a look at this, because it's a great way to get a leg up if you want to establish yourself in the industry, especially if you want to be noticed and sort of open up doors for other opportunities. So yeah, I'm super happy to learn more about that.
Yeah, it's a really fun project to be a part of. And like I said, there's training. They do like training like, once a month, where you'll learn either about an identity topic from one of the experts on the team, or you'll learn about, a specific product within Auth0. Like you get a lot of support. It's Christy is the head of the program, and she does a great job of like organizing everything and putting it together. So shout out to Christy and the ambassadors team.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's a thing that like in the idea of DevRel, because you mentioned this is kind of like a training ground for future DevRel folks or advocates. And one thing that I talk about a lot publicly is like the idea of becoming an advocate, or sorry, the goals for advocates are you should be around creating other advocates. Now, whether that's creating other advocates to join Auth0 or creating other advocates to just go out in the field and do stuff, I think it's extremely important because sustainability is like a thing that matters, especially in tech. So having some sort of flywheel or a system to grow new folks, so that way we're not always trying to chase after all the people we already know about. It levels the playing field, but also it provides doors that are open and sort of like step ups for people who could use them too as well. So I imagine, I don't know how close you are to the program, but I'm sure there's probably some notable folks who are doing some great work. And I'm curious, are there examples like, do y'all have a website that people could see the content that the ambassadors are putting out there?
So the content is usually, it'll be either on the Auth0 blog or on the Auth0 YouTube channel, and I can link you to some of those. But one noticeable one is Mahmoud, and he's currently a developer advocate at Prisma. He was in the program, and he did a Egghead talk about React authentication with Auth0, and that's one of the things he used to actually get his job as a developer advocate at Prisma, to kind of to show that he knows what he's doing. And it was a really, really good video.
Yeah, I've definitely seen him around on Twitter, and he just recently gave a sort of junior developer advocate talk at DevRelCon just quite a few months ago. I didn't get a chance to catch it, but I did read one of his blog posts on the same subject. And yeah, it's nice that people that are sort of showing the path that you can sort of lead yourself into to get into this line of work. So going back to the Auth0 actions, I'm curious, if I were to want to build my own action, like, can I just write this in JavaScript, or is there like a specific SDK that I need to be aware of?
Actions, it's a Node.js environment, and it's actually a code editor on the site. So if you have a Auth0 account and you go to actions within your dashboard, there's a Monaco code editor inline on the page that you can use to write the action. And yeah, it's Node.js code. I believe 16 is the version that it's using. I don't quote me on that.
Yeah, most likely 16 is the latest stable release. So I imagine whatever environments people have that running.
Yeah, and then so if you can read the docs and kind of tell you like what it has, because it has like an event object. It's kind of like the main thing that you would use to get, what you may need, whether that's like a username, the user's location, things like that, like any metadata that you need. And you can use that to write the code and have it do what you need it to do. And right there on the site, and then you can deploy it. And then once it's deployed, you'll have a chance to submit it to the marketplace.
Okay. And then you had mentioned there's so the marketplace, but are these things that are hosted on Auth0's cloud? Or you also mentioned like low code as well. So I'm curious, do I need to have a place to host this myself, or I'm just using this in the Auth0 Monaco editor, and then it's going to be hosted down the road?
Yeah, you are correct. We actually host the code. So that's why I say it's low code right in the editor. You write a couple functions and it's hosted on Auth0 servers. You never have to touch your own code base to kind of, make these changes.
Okay, cool. And then if people wanted to sort of jump into this now, where you'd mentioned the docs, but like where can people find the docs for getting started?
Well, first, we have a bunch of blog posts talking about actions. I just released one talking about one of the no-code ways with Auth0 and Plivo to do two-factor authentication with SMS. But if you did want to go straight into the docs, you can go to auth0.com/docs/actions, and that'll tell you how actions work. You'll get like a demo of how to write your first action, and then you can go through and see like the different things about it, like how to trigger an action and things like that.
Cool. Excellent. Well, hopefully everybody listening, they can find those URLs. We'll have links in the show notes as well. Just hit us up on Twitter if you don't see them, or just find yourself at heavybit.com/podcast/JAMstack radio. Again, also in the show notes. And With that, Will, did anything else in Auth0 happening that you wanted to mention before we sort of slide into the picks section?
I would probably say the main thing is that as actions continue to grow and we add more use cases, the big plan is to have like the no code integrations from the marketplace be like 90% cover like 90% of all common use cases, and maybe about 10% is you having to write custom code. Our big plan is to make sure any common use case when it comes to authentication, or even like custom things, like I said, the ID verification can be handled with a plug and play solution. So that way you can get back to, doing the things and making the cool features and the things that aren't related to identity. So that's like the big plan.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to actually trying this myself. Like, I'm very familiar with all these sort of low code functions, actions, lambdas, and built inside of platforms. So definitely want to try this out. And folks, if you have any interest in updating or upgrading your authentication solution, check out Auth0. And with that said, I'm going to transition to picks. In the JAMstack ecosystem, like, we've seen a lot of growth recently, lots of crazy acquisitions and fundraising. But I'd love to take this time to talk about some picks, things that we're jamming on. In particular, these things could be music, food, gaming, code related. Everything's on the table. And with that, I wanted to actually share my first pick, which I'd prefaced with you before we actually started the recording. Is my pick is Twitter Spaces. And I'm a big fan of it. I know you've been using them. You've been jumping in Spaces as well. But the reason I even know about Twitter Spaces is because you had Spaces like back in the day. We just had like just random people in the developer community, and you'd interview them. And I think you were the first person that actually sat in a space that, because like Clubhouse is another tool, an app that also got big in 2021. Mm-hmm. But every time I jumped in a space or a Clubhouse, it was kind of like awkward of like, hey, come grab the mic, jump up and say whatever you want and some random stuff, or talk about like some like sort of like the versus after party. Yeah. But like your spaces were always so smooth, and like you had the conversation going, and you had brought up people, and like people would ask questions and weren't shy. And that's when it sort of clicked, like in the summertime when I was in your spaces, like, hey, I could do this. So I actually started doing spaces over the summer, and then started doing it more consistently in the last couple months. And yeah, it's actually been going pretty well. Like for Twitter as a platform, I've never really like thought seriously about it until like this year. Mm-hmm. Like I've just always like just tweeted whatever and shared blog posts. But for networking and engaging community, like Twitter is really making a lot of sense. And Spaces is like that sort of layer that's kind of gluing everything else together, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm curious your thoughts, and like if you have any if you wanted to share a bit of your history with Twitter Spaces.
Sure. Yeah. First, I agree, man. I love Twitter Spaces. It's that thing that Twitter needed, right? Because when you're watching the tweet, you're reading it, depending on what your mood is, you might read it a certain way, and it may not have been taken that way. And we all seen what happens on Twitter. But I think with Spaces, you're allowed to see, people's voice inflection, their incitement, and it kind of like just makes the relationships deeper. Like I remember the first time I was in one, and it was like with a lot of people I look up to, like Natter was in there, Demetrius Clark from Netlify. It was like a lot of people who I looked up to, and it was just so cool to hear them chat, outside of reading their tweets. Yeah, so that's why I started hosting my own, to where I would interview people. I was basically asking about their career and what advice they could give to others. And I liked it because it was free. Like with the podcast, you have to, edit and make sure everything is perfect. With Spaces, I was just always go off the cuff and just say whatever I was feeling. It just felt more fun and free, and it I enjoyed them a lot. And I like getting the audience involved, let them give a chance to, ask a question or maybe ask for advice particular to their own situation. Because, sometimes you may listen to a podcast and you be like, well, how can that be applied to me? You don't really get that chance. So with Spaces, you get a chance to do that live. So yeah, I love it.
Yeah. And they've been shipping some. So I've been doing consistent Spaces. I'm actually connected to Twitter as well. So they've been actually chatting with me about my Spaces, which is, I'm just kind of honored that they would reach out and connect with me. So with that, like I've got access to like new features for Spaces, like recording. So you mentioned like the podcast element.
Mm-hmm.
What I like about that, hitting the record button, is that people can find it later. And the thing about Twitter is like if someone retweets that with the recording there, that's another 10 people that are going to, or 10 to 100 or whatever people that can have access to that conversation. It only lasts, it's kind of like Twitch. It only lasts like 30 days and then it expires or deletes itself or whatever. But I don't know. I feel like by now, if you haven't been noticing what's happening on Twitter and like the Twitter Spaces, and by the time this podcast comes out, like I would highly recommend, if you're doing DevRel, set it up. Like the effort is pretty low to basically get a friend or get another coworker to have a conversation about a thing. I think the moment is the moment was last year basically, but if you haven't got into it, like definitely check it out now. I figured there's going to be a world where there's like consistent Spaces hosts. I'm starting to see like celebrities and like big name people starting to do Spaces, which is also interesting as well.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing. Like people would do like after parties for shows and stuff like that. I've seen that on Twitter Spaces.
Yeah, it's just mind blowing how accessible people are on Twitter. So, Will, that's my pick. I'm going to stop there. Did you have any picks for the audience?
Sure. So for me, it is Framer Motion 3D. It was just released not too long ago. And if you don't know what Framer Motion is an animation library for React. And the reason why I like it is because it's really, really declarative and it's in the mindset and mental model of React. Basically just passing some prompts to do animations, and you can make it really, really declarative. You can make an object called a variant, give it names you want. So if you want it to be open, you can describe what open looks like to you in a super declarative manner, and then call open in the prop, and it'll animate to open. It's super, super smart. I'm really into Framer Motion, but the 3D Framer Motion is really exciting because one of the things I was looking into is like, okay, how can I, do 3D on the web? So I was looking at like WebGL and React 3 Fiber. So Framer Motion 3D is a layer. So there's already the like 3GS, which is a layer on top of WebGL. Then React 3 Fiber is a layer on top of 3GS. And now Framer Motion is like another layer on top of all of that. But it allows you to create like 3D interactions in your websites, declarative using the syntax from Framer Motion and a couple of components from React 3 Fiber.
Okay. Wow. That's that's a lot of words. But yeah, I mean, I've been a familiar framer for the longest time. Never mess with 3D stuff because I just figured that's just another layer of expertise I'm never going to have. But yeah, I'm excited for you to check it out, and excited for other folks if you're interested in checking out Framer 3D as well. And then I think in passing, you had mentioned like on Twitter that you're working on a Framer course. Do you want to plug that?
Sure. So I have recorded pretty much an introduction Framer Motion course of how to animate your applications using Framer Motion. It's about 11 lessons. It's only like 27 minutes. So it's really short, and it's available for free on egghead.io. So if you type in my name in Egghead, you should find it. But of course, we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well.
All right. Excellent.
And one of the biggest things about it, if you're on the fence, because some people are like, oh, I don't know anything about animation. Animation is hard. That's one of the things you don't have to worry about with Framer Motion. The creator, Matt Perry, he's very smart, and he made a lot of defaults for Framer Motion. So if you still want good UI animations without knowing anything about how to animate, then Framer Motions is definitely something to check out.
Nice.
Because if you sign up for my email list, you get like a preview lesson. Some people told me that they've used that preview lesson to do like projects to show in like job interviews and stuff like that. And the interviewers were impressed with that extra polish and things like that. So animation works.
Nice. And Will, thanks so much for chatting about Auth0, catching us up with Auth0 actions, as well as even mentioning and passing the marketplace. Like, again, did not even know that was a thing. But with that, folks, keep spreading the jam. That's all the time we have for today. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us on Twitter at JAMstack Radio. To learn more about Heavybit, visit heavybit.com. And while you're there, check out their library. It's packed with amazing talks on sales, marketing, product, and general management from founders of developer tools companies and other industry leaders.